before I begin, Florence? Do you want to repeat about the connection, or are we ready to go?
I think we are ready to go. I will just say, for the one who would like the translation, you have at the bottom of your screen an icon interpretation. You click on the icon and you choose the language. Vous avez en bas de votre écran une icône interprétation.
In the bottom of your screen, you can find the word interpretation. Please click on it. You will find the different languages and choose your favorite one. If you're following from a device or a tablet,
it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first of a series of webinars on the theme of Our Sisters, Our Future, Health and Spiritual Care for Aging. This is a very important initiative between the UISG and the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation. And our meeting today, either this morning, very early morning in some parts of the world, or very late evening in other parts, is divided into 5 sections. We will have an introduction from Sister Jane Walker-Huey after our prayer. She will speak on behalf of the Hilton Foundation. Father Tom Galt from Cara will help us look at the trends that are happening in relation to sisters and aging. A panel of speakers will discuss some critical issues. There will be a question and answer session. And then at the end, you will be asked to complete a short survey, which will help us to gather data, which is important for this initiative. So my task is to keep the process flowing and on time. My name is Sister Pat Murray. I'm the Executive Secretary of the International Union for Superiors General. And I just want to say to you, if you have any questions as we proceed through the session, please write them in the chat. And we will deal with some of them in the question and answer session, but they will also help us to shape our second webinar when we look at your questions. The biographies of the various speakers will be available in detail, as will a recording of this session. So we would begin now with the opening prayer, which was prepared by Sister Sylvia Kagulura from Zambia. And so we'll begin with our prayer.
So thank you, Pat. I will invite you now to pray, to place ourselves in the presence of God, and especially as well in the presence of all those sisters and people that are aging. That's why we are here for them today, to think of them, to think of us as well, and to think of so many people that have blessed us with their lives. Let us place ourselves in the presence of God as we listen and pray with a song.
Holy Spirit, guide my vision, help me see the way you see, always
And that prayer places us in the context of God's Spirit guiding us as we move through the rest of our session. And I would like to begin by introducing Sister Jane Wakahui, who is a member of the Little Sister of St. Francis. Sister Jane provides leadership and direction at the Hilton Foundation's Program Department. She's in charge of budgets, contracts, and management and policy implementation. Sister Jane oversees the development, planning, and evaluation of the Catholic Sisters Initiative within the Hilton Foundation. And her responsibilities include advancing the vitality of congregations of women religious globally, enhancing the capacity of sisters worldwide in sustaining and developing themselves, but also the human community. She also supports the effectiveness of Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Now, Sister Jane has an extensive biography, and I'm going to leave you to read that for yourselves afterwards. But it's with great personal pleasure that I welcome Sister Jane today, knowing it's very early morning in Los Angeles. She joins us, and she has and is giving enormous support to Catholic sisters worldwide through many different organizations. So Sister Jane, you are very welcome here today to help us launch this initiative in terms of the future of the health and spiritual care for aging sisters. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sister Pat, and for that beautiful introduction. And good morning, evening, and good night, wherever you are. And thank you, sisters, for being here today. It demonstrates the issue of quality elderly care is essential to you. As Pat has said, I'm Sister Jane, and a member of the Little Sisters of St. Francis. And I serve here at the Foundation as Associate Vice President for Programs, Operations, and also head the Catholic Sisters Initiative. I would like to begin by sharing with you about Mr. Hilton. The Hilton Foundation was founded in 1946, and our founder, Conrad Hilton, was educated by Catholic sisters. They really impacted his life because of the work all sisters do to transform society and provide spiritual, pastoral accompaniment and social services to the most vulnerable in our society. In his will and testament, Mr. Hilton instructed the foundation to give aid to the sisters who devote their love and life's work for the good of mankind. As such, the quality of life of Catholic sisters is an essential pillar at the foundation. And the foundation is helping to ensure the quality of life of all Catholic sisters through many ways. First, by building the capacity of sisters to improve the management of their congregations and their ministries, to strengthen congregational services to sisters for their health and wellness, which is so essential to enable sisters to continue to do the extraordinary, difficult, and emotionally challenging work that they carry out wherever they are. We support spiritual care and ongoing formation, strengthening the formation in congregations that is so essential to the vitality of spiritual life and wellness, which is the heart of what it means to be a woman religious. We also supporting creating networks among sisters focused on their ministries, their voices for advocacy, the life of their communities, to break down silos, eliminate isolation, and ensure that sisters around the world can learn from and support one another and contributing to the growth and excellence of sisters ministries in service to those who live in deeply disadvantaged situations. So we support services across a continuum of 4 strategies and 15 sub-strategies. One of the essential strategies today we are discussing is about elderly care. The well-being of elderly sisters is critical. As Pope Francis has said, the elderly are a treasure for our society. Our elderly sisters are a treasure for each of us. Think about it, sisters. Our elderly sisters have spent their lives dedicated to others, providing pastoral, educational, and curative care. Our elderly sisters of the future, that means every one of us, will have done so equally. One question that touches my heart is, how can we ensure a life of dignity of our sisters when they reach their evening years, tired and weary after years of service? And how can we ensure that our congregations have the financial and physical capability to provide that life of dignity and the internal strength and support to provide elderly sisters with intergenerational and intercultural companionship, spiritual support, and ongoing formation in their twilight years? We are on this journey together. Every congregation will see the number of elderly sisters grow. Some already are at this stage, but all of us will reach the age where we need more support from our sisters. As the psalmist says, 70 is the sum of our years, or 80 if we are strong. Catholic sisters are strong, and indeed, many reach 80, 90, and even 100. As Pat has already said, the International Union of Superior Generals and the Hilton Foundation's Catholic Sisters Initiative have joined hands to host this 2-part webinar series to initiate global conversation about quality elderly care to ensure the physical, spiritual, psychological, and well-being of our sisters. We want to promote cross-learning for those in the West who have planted the seed and leaping harvest of adequate planning, to those on other continents where the seed of planning for elderly sisters ought to begin to be sown. We want to start servicing and understanding the questions, identifying congregations who have developed answers, discussing how those models might be adapted to each congregation's own needs, and laying out the critical planning dimensions that must underpin the action. Perhaps we will find answers and together develop some solutions. The conversation today is a dialogue, sharing experiences, needs, and perspectives. I urge you to bring your questions forward, speak to your needs and concerns, and hopefully bring forward your approaches, both those that have succeeded and those that perhaps have not. I remember Pope Francis' invitation in 2014, asking women religious to look to the past with gratitude, the present with passion, and to the future with hope. Preparing for that future is one of our greatest blessings for our elderly sisters. Today, we start that journey of preparing the future together. Pat has already explained that we have this 2-part dialogue. First is a presentation on the trends using data to understand where we are and where we ought to go. And the second will be panel of discussion with sisters to journey towards quality care of our elderly sisters. We are really privileged to have an expert and a leader in research and data on global women's religious. Father Tom Gant is a Jesuit priest and executive director of the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate at Georgetown University. He has a BA in philosophy from St. Louis University, a master's in divinity from Loyola University Chicago, and a PhD in city planning from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Prior to becoming executive director at CARA, Father Tom was the executive secretary of Jesuit conferences here in USA, the National Office for Jesuit of the USA. But even before that, Father Tom was a priest in the Diocese of Charlotte, South Carolina. So he knows the data, but he also knows firsthand our lives of ministry in service to a community in need. Now I welcome Father Tom to do his presentation.
Thank you very much, Sister Jane. I'm trying to share my screen. I have it now. It's not coming up.
We can see the presentation. You just to
Oh, you
start.
can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank
If you
you.
can just put
Put it-
the presentation mode.
Okay. There it is.
There
Is
it
that-
is. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the kind introduction, Sister Jane. Cara has been doing this type of work for almost 60 years. I've been here just the last 10. So we have lots of research that we've been doing both in North America and throughout the world. And currently, Cara is involved in assisting or partnering with research with sisters in Latin America, across Africa, and in South and East Asia. What I'd like to emphasize is that social science research, the data collection we're doing, it's important to recognize that the data is only giving us a snapshot, a look at one brief moment in time, and that the data is always moving and changing. So one of the things to keep in mind at this point is that religious life has its own history. It has eras when religious life has been increasing in numbers, and then moments where religious life has decreased in numbers. So there's a certain cycle in the pattern in the membership of religious communities. Religious life with its membership, grows or declines because of the economic situation of an area, because of the political environment, because of larger population changes, and various opportunities and needs. Another characteristic to keep in mind is that religious communities include many ages and generations. And so it can go from the youngest being about 18 years of age all the way up to 105. There are very few other groups in the world that will cover such a vast range of ages and generations. So it would not be unusual that a given religious community, local community in a particular city or town, might have 3 or 4 generations all living and ministering together under one roof. Here is a table. This data is taken from the Statistical Yearbook of the Church, which is published by the Vatican every year. Now, as we look at this data, it's important to keep in mind that the Vatican data is not always the most current and sometimes not always the most accurate, but it's the best data we have in looking at the entire world and for religious in the world. So what we see here, and this is looking at 1999, 2009, and 2019 by the different regions of the world, we see this very sharp decline in the number of religious sisters in Europe, going from 374,000 down to 216,000 over just 20 years. And a similar drop in North America, going from about 105,000 to 51,000. And a smaller drop in South America, going from 89,000 to 65,000. So in these regions of the world, there's been a notable decline in the number of sisters in temporary or professed vows. On the contrast, we can see the growth that is occurring in other regions of the world, particularly in Africa, where the number of sisters has gone from about 51,000 to over 77,000 a few years ago, and also in South and East Asia, where the growth of sisters has gone from 130,000 to 170,000. So we see that in Africa and in South and East Asia, notable growth in the number of sisters. Overall, across the world, the number of sisters is declining, primarily because of the decline in Europe and in North America. One way to look at religious life and the vocations is to pay attention to how many younger Catholics are there. So what's the proportion of younger Catholics? This can be a hard number to get a hand on. And so we have here, this is again from the Vatican data, and it's the number of child baptisms per 1,000 Catholics by their given region. What it gives us is an indication of how many younger Catholics are there in any given year. And so we see here that there has been a drop in every region across the world. So we already know that the population of the world is actually slowing down its increase. It's not declining as a total number, but the growth is slowing down. And so we have a fewer or a smaller proportion of younger Catholics that would be potential vocations in the future. So we again see here the declines in Europe and North America, but also we see the declines in Africa, in Central America, in Asia, South and East, in the number of younger Catholics that are there. So we have to keep this in mind, that as we have experienced a large number of vocations in some regions of the world in the last 20 years, we're not likely to be experiencing that same large growth in the next 20 years, simply because the Catholic population of young people will not be quite as large. Kara is working with sisters on research projects related to this topic in a number of countries. Here are 4, but we're also working with sisters in Uganda, Ghana, Zambia, Nigeria, and India. But here are looking at 4 specific countries and some of the differences about the sisters in each country. So one, we look at the number of institutes in each country. In Kenya, there is about 150. In Mexico, 295. In the United States, 523. In Vietnam, 204. And so we have in each country could be a quite different number of institutes that are ministering and living there. The same is true when we look at the number of houses, and these are of individual communities. So across Kenya, there'd be 650 houses. In Mexico, over 2,700. In the United States, 7,500 separate communities. In Vietnam, 563. So this makes a big difference in terms of how spread out and also what would be the average number of sisters in a given community or house. And so we see that in Vietnam, you would have a large, most communities in Vietnam would have a larger number of sisters in any given community. So they would average 40 or more sisters in a particular community. The contrast would be the United States, where on average, the community would only be about 5 or 6 members. The total number of sisters in each country also varies significantly. These 4 countries all represent countries that have a large number of sisters. But we see Kenya with 7,600, Mexico with over 25,000, the United States with 41,000, Vietnam with 24,000. A key factor, especially when we look at the care for elderly or infirm members, is just what is the size of the institute itself. The challenges are very different if your institute has 100 or more members, or if your institute is much smaller with fewer than 100 members. In Kenya, 75% or so of all the religious institutes have 100 members or more. In Mexico, about 39%, the United States, 31%, in Vietnam, 50%. And so we see this difference in Kenya and in Vietnam, as for example, that the majority of institutes would have 100 or more members. So the challenges would be quite different in those settings. And then we see the other side of it, of those with less than 100 members. And so that's where Mexico and the United States would stand out, that close to 2/3 of all the religious institutes of sisters have fewer than 100 members. And so the challenges of caring for those elderly or infirm members can be much more difficult. We also look at what proportion of the sisters are age 70 or older. This can be a challenging figure to get simply because the data is not out there or collected. So the estimate is that in Kenya, about 20% of the sisters would be over age 70. In Mexico, it'd be about 39%. In the United States, which is quite different here, it would be 76%. So that 3/4 of all the sisters are age 70 or older. And then on the opposite side would be a country such as Vietnam, where probably about 10% or fewer of the sisters are over age 70. So the realities in each country can be very, very different, and the challenges that go with that. So this is just a very quick look at a few points of data that we have collected. What does this data mean for us? And what are we learning from the data as we consider it? In the past year, Kara has done a number of focus groups with major superiors in the United States. Our research partners in Nairobi have done the same thing with major superiors in Kenya, and our partners in Mexico City have done the same thing with major superiors in Mexico. When we took our notes from these focus groups of major superiors, it was somewhat surprising to see that in whichever country, we came up really with the similar issues and concerns from the major superiors. The first of the issues was providing for the general well-being of the aging or elderly sisters. The second one was financing the general needs of the congregation. And so on this first particular need, providing for the general well-being of their aging and ailing members, the number one concern was simply providing quality health care to the sisters, especially in meeting the needs of those sisters who are suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, that this is a very particular challenge that everyone faces. It's also finding facilities where the ailing sisters can reside, and they will not be isolated from community and family. So how for the elderly sisters can they remain close to the community, close to their own families? Third one was providing the quality mental health care for the sisters. A fourth one, which came up again and again, was meeting the sisters' emotional and especially the spiritual needs. That is, the sisters may not be as mobile and able to get around and be active in items. Doesn't mean that their spiritual life has disappeared or their intellectual life has disappeared. They are still engaged and want to be part of the mission of the community. So how do we begin to address this when they're not as mobile or able to directly participate? And another issue was simply the challenge everywhere of hiring and retaining good healthcare personnel. And what's notable again, these were issues raised in the United States. They were issues raised in Kenya. They were issues raised in Mexico. And we asked the leaders in these focus groups to suggest some solutions for addressing this. How could others help them with it? The first thing they mentioned was hiring the right personnel to assist leaders in the care for members. But they need to be able to have individuals who are trained and are able to help sisters with dementia or sisters who are not mobile, who need a lot of assistance every day. Having all of their ailing sisters in one facility, from assisted care to hospice care, being able to bring the sisters together to provide the care that they need. A third issue was collaborating with other congregations for a shared residential care facility. This highlights the particular concern or need of if your only option is to have the elderly sister going to a facility that may be run by the diocese or some other organization, it can be most stressful if she goes to that facility and she is the only sister there, so that the regular order of religious life, of prayer, of engagement is not present. And especially for elderly sisters can often feel that they're being abandoned. So how can we provide a facility that will maintain that daily order or regularity that elderly sisters have come to expect and rely on for their good health? And then partnering with outside residential care facilities. How do we set up a partnership and not simply be another client to a facility? And then partnerships with organizations such as local colleges. And this becomes particularly important when we look at both the spiritual and intellectual life of older sisters. How do we continue to engage them in their intellectual curiosity, in their wanting to know about the world, and to be engaged in the mission of the community itself? Here on the second theme, which was the concern on financing the general needs of the congregations, what we found is that the financing and the opportunities or the resources go hand in hand with these healthcare needs in the community itself. And the financial challenges reported by the major superiors, they came back and said the importance of planning before the congregation is overwhelmed. So a number of the superiors saying, I wish we had started this earlier, begun to make plans earlier, because now we are overwhelmed and it's much more challenging. Separating and meeting the short-term needs and the long-term health care needs. An example would be a short-term need is we need some more wheelchairs for our elderly sisters. That's a short-term need you can take care of quickly. The long-term need is we have to have community buildings that are accessible to the elderly and those in wheelchairs. And so the long-term need would be, how do we redesign or refit our mother house, our communities, so that our elderly and infirm sisters are able to live there well. Same in terms of financing congregational short-term and long-term operations. So often the reality of congregations, they can figure out their finances for the coming month or maybe for the coming year, but there isn't a financial plan beyond that. And the need to begin separating between the short-term financial need and the long-term financial needs of particularly caring for the elderly sisters. And then it's the financial planning in the midst of unexpected cost. So it's how to address this and manage this. We can begin to set aside money, but then suddenly there's an urgent emergency need. How do we begin to balance this and work with it? And the final item was properties management. And it was the major superiors noting that often enough that they held properties, buildings, and that they needed help in terms of kind of the wise use of that land and the properties, the facilities they had, that this could be better used to care for the elderly members. So the suggested financial solutions, again, this is all coming from the major superiors in the US, in Kenya, and in Mexico. The suggested financial solutions were needing to collaborate with other congregations on financial matters. That few, if any, congregations can begin to address this by themselves. It's just too big and too complicated and too expensive. And the need to collaborate together on how to manage the finances. The very practical need of hiring a business manager for the congregation, recognizing that the congregation needs someone with some professional experience and knowledge of just how to manage the business aspect of the congregation. Learning how to better estimate and plan for the cost associated with using outside care facilities. These are options that are very important, and we need to think ahead how we can be able to use them in the future. And then the final one was forming a finance committee for the congregation to give advice to the congregational leaders. The need to get, so again, some expert, experienced advice of how to do some of the financial planning and use of resources so that one is looking forward 5, 10, 20 years in what is needed for the members. Now, it's important also, as we look at this question of the aging sisters and the issues and challenges, that we not ignore the voices of younger sisters, of newer sisters. And so I'd like to highlight here, this is the voices from the United States, but Kara recently did a study with over 3,000 young sisters across the United States, and asking them in terms of their hopes and expectations. And it's important to hear that the younger members, those who are inheriting all these challenges, that their hopes for the coming 10 years is an increase in the clarity of mission and identity in their own institutes. That they eagerly anticipate an evolution of religious life, and they look forward to an increased collaboration across generations. And that these younger members, newer members, are eager to move beyond diminishment. They want to expand the mission of their institute, look for new avenues of ministry. But at the same time, they are drawn to return to the roots of their institute and to restore a sense of the original charism. These younger, newer members, they want to be committed to living the charism more vibrantly, to a greater effort to live in solidarity with the poor and the marginalized. And they also recognize that stewardship in the community, the institute, involves often divesting of empty buildings or underutilized properties or sponsored institutions, and to live more simply, utilizing human material resources to benefit the needy. So as we address these great challenges of caring for the elderly infirm members, we need to also be attentive to the younger members and their hopes and aspirations. And I think their voices and their concerns should be a great support and inspiration throughout. So this has been a very brief overview. We have here much, much more data coming from countries throughout the world, and we are continuing to work on these projects and to provide more data for this consideration. But here are some questions to consider in terms of the challenges. Thinking practically, what are my religious institutes and my elderly members' physical needs? This can be wheelchairs, access to bathrooms, having an aide to help them each day. What are their spiritual needs? As a sister is older and not able to get around, does not mean that her mind is gone, that she is not committed to the mission, wants to be engaged in the mission, and has a rich spiritual life. And her spiritual life needs to be nourished, and she needs to be able to share this with others. So let us not forget the spiritual needs of the oldest members. What are the community engagement needs? How do the older members, who again are not as mobile or able to be actively and physically actively engaged, how do they still participate in the community's mission and apostolate? We need to think creatively of how to engage these sisters. We have all taken religious vows. We have made our commitment for life to this mission. How do we help one another to achieve that even in our elder years? And then what are the financial needs? What are some of the financial resources or avenues available to us? And how might we best develop those moving into the future? So thank you very much, Sister Jane, Sister Pat, and I'll move it to the moderator for any questions or observations.
Thank you very much, Father Tom, for that overview, giving us a sense of the challenges and the trends from the level of major superiors who were reflecting on many of the practical areas and issues that they need to address. As you said, some recognizing that the need is almost overwhelming, and others seeing that the planning must begin for the future. I think I was particularly struck by the reflection by the younger religious towards the end. And I underlined for myself the sentence where they said that members of all ages, they want to see all members committed to living the charism more vibrantly. And I think that came through your own presentation, in the sense is the desire, our desire as women religious is to live with vibrancy, that charism, supported in the very practical ways that we need to put in place so that all can do that, particularly as sisters age. So we're going to postpone the kind of comments or the questions until after we have the panel discussion, which I think will build very nicely on what you've already put in context for us from different parts of the world. So I'm going to have a conversation now with Sister Siobhan O'Keefe, who works in the UK, Sister Nirmala Nazareth from India, and Sister Carol Zinn from the United States. Now, these are three extraordinary women who come with a lot of experience from different levels and different sectors. Sister Carol, as you may know, is a sister of St. Joseph, and currently Sister Carol is the executive director of the Leadership Conference for Women Religious in the United States. Sister Siobhan O'Keefe is a sister of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary, known as Chigwell Sisters often. She's a registered nurse, has qualified in theology, and has a diploma in person-centered dementia care. And she comes with her practical experience of dealing with care at every level. And Sister Nirmala Nazareth is a Superior General from India, from the Apostolic Carmel Congregation, and she has been recently elected as President of the Conference of Religious of India. So I look forward to our conversation together as we, in a sense, explore aspects of this area which are important to all of us who are here on this webinar. We're over 460, so this is obviously something that concerns congregations and leaders and people who are managing aged care in general. So I'm going to begin with the first question, which is looking at sisters as they age, as we age. What do you feel are the most challenging physical and mental health challenges for a congregation to address? And I'm going to begin, Sister Siobhan, by asking you if you'd begin to reflect on that question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sister Pat. Thank you very much for your very kind invitation to be with you this afternoon. My experience is that elderly sisters experience many of the same health conditions that the general public experience, but we do have other challenges that are specific to religious life. Sisters living in community who are ill, there can be a greater loneliness around the whole area of bereavement. They suffer bereavement within their own families, and they suffer bereavement within community, both of which can have a massive impact on the person. There is a big need in our communities for acknowledgement that members are aging with increasing pain, disability, and frailty, reducing cognition, and sisters generally increasingly are living much, much longer, sometimes longer even than the general public. There are issues around accessing affordable healthcare, appointments, waiting times, which the general public have as well. Transport issues, transport to appointments, who drives them, who accompanies them. Denial of issues, fear and isolation, death, the changing nature of the housing that sisters live in and how accessible that is for actually physical care, sisters living alone, very large communities or smaller communities. What about access to care packages from the community? That's something that's available in the UK, but is not a global provision. Increased risk of falls, unsuitable buildings, financial issues, revamping and updating buildings, difficulties recruiting, training, and supervising staff who may have no concept of religious life and come from a very secular world. Problems for staff around union membership, human resource issues, expectations and terms in employment. Sisters may feel a lack of purpose. We have been so busy, so generous in our service all our lives, and where do we fit in now? How do we best continue our mission? And many communities address this very well, and many communities, the elderly sisters will certainly stay involved as a prayer mission, in the support and accompaniment of younger sisters and being mentors to them, but not always. Loneliness is a very real issue for elderly sisters, and that sense of isolation, because families may be elsewhere. Some sisters may return to a certain country because their families are nearer them, but that's not always a provision and not always realistic. If sisters are in care facilities, are in registered care facilities, there are a lot of legal expectations around the management of these facilities, which can be restrictive to religious life. Legislation can help to uphold good care, but not always, and it can be very restrictive to sisters fulfilling religious life in the way that they would like.
Can I come in there and maybe Siobhan ask Nirmala, Sister Nirmala, would that be her experience from the position of India and sisters living in India? We saw the numbers there. I'll come back to you, Siobhan, but just want to get a perspective from Sister Nirmala in terms of the challenges for the physical and mental care of sisters within a congregation.
Well, thanks, Pat, for having me here to speak about India. Just a bit of statistic. By 2050, India would have more than 319 million entering into the bracket of the elder. And insofar as religious congregations are concerned, we do not have much data or research or statistics that is available as of now. All that I can say of religious congregations, that the average age in the congregation is between 50 to 60, and that's increasing rapidly now, what we have seen in Europe in the past few years. Besides that, what I feel one of the greatest aspects to be considered is when the sisters are moved from active communities in spaces for old age homes or infirmaries, they feel a bit loss of sense of hope, because they feel that, you know, your time is up now and you are done now. So what I feel is very important is the transition period where the sisters are prepared. And as of now, I don't think many congregations prepare the sisters for the transitionary period from, you know, active ministry to retirement or even to reduced ministry. Another challenge that we in India find is the lack of, you know, elder care facilities, be it user-friendly rooms or mechanized wheelchairs to speak of, or recreational activities or garden spaces, or even to come together to share at their age. One of the things which I heard most, even Father Tom mentioned, is the medical expenditure.
Yeah.
I doubt any congregation in India as of today has a budget specifically assigned for the care of the elder sisters. So I see these as many challenges, and as Sister Jane rightly said, perhaps it is time for the seed to be sown in India to pay attention to the care of the elder, because the elder has a lot of wisdom to transfer to the younger generation.
Thanks very much, Nirmala. I'm going to move on to my second question, which is about, you know, we know that in community, being together as sisters is an essential part of our life where we strengthen each other. So the challenge of maintaining older sisters as part of this sense of community even as they become mentally frail or physically frail. You've touched on that, Nirmala, but I'm going to ask Sister Karen now for her perspective from the United States.
Thanks very much, Sister Pat, and thanks for inviting us to this conversation. Yes, both Sister Siobhan and Sister Nirmala, as I listened to you, I was thinking about how our many sisters here in the United States, as Father Tom showed us so clearly, we have numbers here in the United States that is a gift. And what I can share with you is our learning as we look back, because as you just said, Sister Nirmala, the planning that you spoke about that needs to happen in India, we realized that also about 30 years ago. But we now have a sense of, especially to this piece of community, what we're finding is our senior sisters, we need to make sure that they know that the identity of being a sister, a vowed religious, is until they take their last breath. So the sense of identity is really, really important. The other thing that's important is a sense of belonging. Like, how do you belong to a community when the way you belonged was to be running out the door every day to go to a school or go to a clinic? And what happens when you cannot run out the door every day? How are you still a member of the community? So what we're trying to do is build that sense of identity and also belonging. And, the other piece is that, we age in our physical bodies the way other people age. And so hearing and mobility and being able to remember, those are all a normal part of how we age and enjoy the journey that God gives us for however long God gives it to us. And so there's been a lot of attention and effort on the part of the LCWR leaders to really try to make sure the sisters have what they need to hear better, have large print publications of materials. If there's an assembly that's happening or a community meeting, oftentimes the leaders will gather the senior sisters and talk with them so that they can be engaged in the conversation, because sitting at tables with other sisters for a conversation is challenging. So I think what I would say is that providing for the sisters' needs with great dignity and respect, and helping them to be who they can be and participate as they can, that goes a long way to make sure that the sisters know that they are a part of the community until the moment that they meet God.
Thanks very much, Carl. You're highlighting the fact that at some stage we all step away from ministry, and that can be a painful process. I think, Siobhan, you mentioned earlier, it can give a sense of loss or bereavement. Sister Carl has mentioned efforts to continue giving sisters a sense of ministry even when aging. I wonder, Siobhan, have you anything to add to that conversation?
You should unmute yourself.
You need to unmute yourself here.
Many sisters, I think, can change the focus of ministry. Certainly many older sisters some will be grateful for being able to step back that little bit and to have a more contemplative aspect to their lives that maybe they didn't always have the time or the space to reflect as deeply or to read as much or to join all these wonderful Zooms that are available for people today, or continue either their spiritual or maybe other forms of courses that they would like to do in some form or another. But some will also continue in very real ways. We've had elderly sisters, we have many special needs schools, and some of our very much retired sisters will be the receptionists in the school so that they will still have contact with the children and with the parents and bring a real sense of life and joy into those areas. Sisters may change the focus of their parish ministry and still continue to do some sacramental preparation and things. Others will send emails to justice and peace campaigns be appointed prayer companions for sisters in initial formation. They may still want to do things, run social groups or bingo groups for the elderly who may visit their communities, or be very much involved in things like their prayer companions or oblate programs. So I think sometimes they may not be as actively involved on one level, but maybe even more deeply involved on another, that still keeps them very, very engaged while they are able. And obviously the greatest gift that all sisters offer is their prayer to the church and the world. And they will see that very much as a very real ministry, even when they may not feel very well on any level. So I think some of those are things that I would like to offer to the group.
He said.
Sorry, could you hear me, Pat?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Yes, yes.
Sister Carol, would you like to add anything to this reflection?
Sure, thanks.
Because I know you care deeply about the link between ministry and charism.
Yes, very much so. And the other thing that, again, we have learned here in the United States because of the journey these past 30 plus years is a deeper understanding about religious life, that it is about living this God quest, this quest for God, as Sister Sandra Snyder's talks about. You know, sometimes some of our senior sisters have said the only thing they can do now, they just pray. And so we've worked very hard to help sisters, not only our current elderly sisters, but even our younger sisters, to really understand that this vocation is a ministry in and of itself. And in the United States, maybe in other places of the world too, but the United States, there's so much connection between, you know, I am worth what I'm worth in relationship to what I'm able to do. And so when I'm not able to do anymore, what happens then to my sense of self? So I would say that the meaning and purpose of religious life is being revisited by many of us here in the United States, that it is not about the external ministry, but the life itself is a ministry. The other piece that I realize we're paying attention to is, you know, life really wants to live. And women in particular want to live and give and nourish and nurture. And so we're beginning to pay attention to what does generativity look like when you are 60 and 70 and 80 and 90 years old. So that's a new learning for us, but we're beginning to pay careful attention to that. And the other thing I would offer, Sister Pat, is that, as Father Tom said earlier, it's very difficult when sisters are in a facility where there are not other sisters. So our congregations have tried very hard that if they're not able to care for their own sisters, and some congregations are not able to care for their own sisters, if they do have sisters in another facility, that they at least go in 2s and 3s and 4s, and so that they're not alone. But here's the thing we're learning, even where a sister is alone in another facility, what they are beginning to say to their leaders is, at my age, I never thought that I'd be engaged in another ministry, to be present to people, to go around and visit them. And so there's a wondering that some of us are having in terms of the value of keeping the sisters all together, or perhaps maybe for some sisters, providing places where they can in fact be in ministry and mission in a way that is generative for them.
Thanks very much, Carl. You know, the whole area of being a sister and spirituality being at the heart of our life. And we are challenged in our life path to grow spiritually. So even as sisters age, Nirmala, I wonder, how would you see as a superior general the challenge of supporting the spiritual formation of sisters right throughout life, but particularly in the later stages of life?
I think, Sister Pat, you have brought in a very, very important point, and I'm sure all sisters would agree with me that often sisters always see that work, 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 work. And it's only work that makes us, or, is our life. And we really need to focus right from the initial formation that religious life is not meant just for work or active ministry, but that there is something more to that. And I think that, as I heard Sister Carol speak, it's also the sisters are led to, praying ministry, that they are just prayer groups, praying for their congregation, the needs of the world, the needs of their country. And I think this is important for us to focus not only at the initial formation, but an ongoing formation right up till the end of our lives, that it is our spirituality and our sisterhood which is to be emphasized and given priority, rather than attach work to our lives. That if there's no work, we are nothing. That should be out of our formation, but it should be more of an accompaniment all along our journey to discover more about God and to discover who we are in the presence of God. I feel this is very, very important aspect of our lives. And also to train the younger generation, the younger sisters, to be walking with the elder ones in the communities, because they are handing over the wisdom, the richness, the heritage, the culture of the congregation into the hands of the younger generation.
Thank you. You've just stressed an area that Pope Francis talks about regularly, particularly on when he celebrates the Day of Consecrated Life, the accompaniment of the younger and the older members, the reciprocity in the journey of life. Carl, have you anything to add there? And then I'll come to Siobhan.
Yeah, thanks again, Sister Pat. Oh, Sister Nirmala, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the formation, the need for formation. What we have begun to say here in this part of the world is that the need for ongoing formation and lifelong formation is showing up everywhere. And we would no more say to a newer member, here's the constitution of the congregation, go take some workshops, read some articles, come back and talk to us, and we'll admit you to the congregation. We would not consider that a formation program. And yet most of us had formation programs that maybe take us to maybe about age 40 of how to be a religious. After age 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, many of us are on our own to just kind of figure it out, So I really appreciate what you said, Sister Nirmala, that the formation of how to live this life from the time we enter until the time we meet God is absolutely critical. I think the other piece I would add, Sister Pat, is that the formation really does need to pay attention to our life, our physical life, our cognitive life, our emotional life, our spiritual life. Many times the clinical aspect of healthcare, making sure medication is taken or physical therapy happens, those things are done very well. Some of the other aspects of holistic living are not done so well. So I think what I would offer is the ongoing formation is really formation at a holistic level, including the spiritual, but really at a holistic level. And the final thing is that this life is a prayer life, it's a shared life, and it's a consecrated life until I meet God. So how do we as leaders continue to help our sisters of all ages live those dimensions of this vocation to the full? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carl. I'm going to move to our last question, because we do know within our communities that as people age and go into their final time of life, that there are those who accompany them as caregivers. And the question I would ask would be, what are the key principles of accompanying sisters in those final months or years of her life? And And have you seen in your experience, your own personal experiences, congregations helping to prepare sisters effectively for that final period of their life? And maybe Siobhan, you have a particular expertise in that area and a lot of experience. Maybe you'd like to begin the reflection.
I think one of the key principles of care in this area generally is encouraging or empowering people to be able to be present with, to be with people at all stages of the journey as they become frail. I think all of us appreciate people being with us at any stage of our life journey, but particularly if you're feeling in a very vulnerable or in a fragile area. A lot of emphasis today in all areas is around the whole area of listening, people being able to be a praying presence with and for the person who is unwell, and also for their caregivers. Support the person to do what they are able to do for as long as possible, and focus on wellness rather than on illness. Create safe spaces for the person to name their fears and concerns in an honest way, and to have sensitive dialogue with the person, and pace it at their pace rather than at our pace. Sensitivity and confidentiality. Sisters to have advocates who will advocate for them along the journey, whether that's in dealing with situations within community or with external agencies, and for communities to be open to receiving support from the outside agencies on input on things like stroke, Parkinson's, dementia, and other areas. Pastoral care teams within communities. Some have appointed pastoral care teams specifically. And if sisters are in outside facilities from their own communities, that there are a team of people who visit them and support them on a regular basis, that people don't feel isolated. Some sisters put their sisters forward for CPE training or other forms of pastoral accompaniment training. And now there is more and more stuff available to people. But I think also it's very important that we support the people who journey with people, because the emotional and spiritual demands on them can be huge as well. There's a lot of work done in the general public today, and increasingly within communities, on advanced care planning, and people to have the opportunity and the time to be well informed about how to express your wishes for your end of life care. Now, end of life is a very broad subject. Today, palliative care is anticipated to be within the last year of life. But long before that, while I'm well, while I have capacity, while I'm well enough to think about what I might like, where I might like to be cared for, who I might like the support people to be in my circle, who they are, and how do we involve them appropriately and sensitively, and issues to be documented. If it's not written down, it didn't happen, would be a very common phrase in things today. And how do we support families? I know our own congregation are very good on collecting people from families from airports, accommodation, transport, sometimes funding as well to support families. But today as well, we need to look at right across the world on how do we adapt what we do to meet the different cultural norms and requirements.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you. I'm just, as we end, I'm going to ask Nirmala and Carol if you have a last word you want to say, and if you can say it briefly, because I want to take a little break before we get into questions and answers. Maybe Nirmala, you would like to begin.
Well, I think this is a great platform, and I want to say it could not have been a better time than the synodal journey, where we are walking together, sharing with each other and learning from each other. It's no longer your congregation or mine, India or US or Africa or any other country, but we are all in it together. And we need this kind of interaction and sharing, which is learning and giving and helping us on our journey. Thank you, Sister Pat.
Thank you, Nirmala. Carl?
Yes, thanks, Sister Pat. And I would echo the gratitude that you just offered, Sister Nirmala. I think as Father Tom showed us in the very beginning of this conversation, this situation of aging is real and it is universal. And each of us will have to engage it in our own culture. But I think some of the universal principles, if you will, come from our faith, that this life is really a witness to the Paschal mystery. That's the gift of religious life to the world. How do we live? How do we die? Knowing that we believe in the resurrection. And so everything we've talked about this morning seems to me some information about how we might answer those questions. How do we really live with each other? We are one another's family in a way that other vocations are not. And so how do we really hold that with great tenderness and great love and accompanying each other and learning from each other? So I'm very grateful for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl, Nirmala, and Siobhan for this wonderful, really nourishing conversation. Certainly, I know it has helped me, as I'm sure it has helped those who are listening. And now we're going to take a 3-minute break, just a stretch break, as we go into the question and answer session. So in my part of the world, it's 21 minutes past the hour. So we will recommence at 25 minutes. And if you have questions or comments in whatever language, please place them in the chat, and then we will continue this conversation. It may have sparked something in you, some reaction or some thought, some reflection you want to share, some question you want to ask. So I look forward to seeing us all again in 3 minutes' time. Thank you very much. Thank you very much and welcome back. I'm looking at the chat at questions. I see a question here about how to accompany sisters who have dementia. I see another question about interest in this, keeping the link between the community and family, and to underline in a sense the goodness, the positive aspects of aging. And then somebody here is talking about intergenerational living is a witness and a mission in today's world. So perhaps some of you would like to comment on some of those questions, and I leave it open to yourselves. Siobhan, I see your microphone on.
Regarding care and support of people with dementia, I think a hugely important thing is having the right care staff. That if the connection isn't there, if there isn't an easy connection between the carer and the person living with dementia, both sides' anxiety rises phenomenally and aggravates the situation. So the recruitment, training, selection, ongoing supervision of the care staff is absolutely crucial. The other thing would be when spending time with people with dementia would be brief rather than extended periods of time, because people are only able to cope with short periods of time rather than great intensity. Obviously a great deal of gentleness, and dementia care is a language of spirit, of soul and spirit. It's not a language of logic. So it's a spirit to spirit connection.
Thank you, Siobhan. Thank you. Carl, have any of those questions that were posed? Perhaps the one of family and community connectedness being important.
I think that the other one that just caught my eye, Sister Pat, is how do you deal with sisters who apparently would deny that they're already in their 80s and stage of diminishment? I think it's denial is everywhere on lots of levels, and I wonder if denying our age is not an indication of the fear.
Yeah.
What will happen to me? What will I become? Where will I live? And so I think it speaks where there is denial. I think it is an opportunity for a conversation about what is this sister feeling in terms of the meaning of her life, and will I be cast away? Will I just be put somewhere? Those are very real questions. And they're also, at least in this part of the world, they're part of the larger culture also. Older people are feeling they don't want to be a burden to their families. I think some of our senior sisters don't want to be a burden to the younger generations or to the congregation. So I think that the reality of denial, both of physical health, mental health, spiritual health, I think it's a doorway for a very serious conversation.
Nirmala, have you anything you'd like to add?
There's a question there, how to educate sisters to have a positive transition from active ministry to old age. I think it's very important, not only when we reach the age to start thinking, but it is to be part of our conversation between the intergenerational composition of our communities, and also time and again to bring the elder sisters to share how they feel in this time of their age, in their evening of their lives, and what are their fears, or how do they spiritually nourish themselves. And this is not just a one-off thing, but it has to be done regularly, both with different age groups as well as only to bring the older sisters for get-togethers, to be able to share, to speak their heart out, and to express what they feel and where they are at that point of time in their lives.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Patricia Morgante if you would read some of the questions in Spanish, if you would translate them so that we're not leaving anybody out.
Yeah, one of the questions in Spanish was about which is the best choice to leave the elderly sisters in the house of the congregation or sending in another place. This is a key question. Another question in French was to learn about this platform. I don't know what she meant about that. Another in Italian was interesting that sometimes the young sisters are in charge to take care of the elderly sisters. So this is another perhaps question and comments for you.
Sister Pat, maybe I could pick up on that last one that Patricia just offered. That is something we are hearing in this part of the world from our younger sisters, a desire and great love for their senior sisters and to help, care for them. At the same time, they have another 30, 40, 50 years of their own religious life. And so how to do both. The other place where that rises is serving in elected leadership. Is it the purpose of a religious vocation to care for the senior sisters or to serve in leadership, especially when there are so few of the younger sisters? So it's opening up a very serious conversation. How do we make sure the younger sisters have the freedom that many of us had for many years in our life to be about furthering the mission and the charism? And how do we help them to be able to do that? At the same time, how do we care for our senior sisters very appropriately and lovingly? So it's a very serious question that's rising here, perhaps in other parts of the world too.
So perhaps you're saying, Carol, that helping congregations to have the supports they need, the finances they need for the supports of elder sisters, which also allows younger sisters to accompany them, but not being in charge of managing them. Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it, Pat.
Yeah.
There's also an important point that we have to be able to actually meet the sisters' needs. We may always want to keep all of our sisters in our regular communities, but are we really able to really meet all of their needs? So it's that very fine discernment and ongoing review of the care needs.
The whole question of training and preparation for pastoral accompaniment seems to, certainly in some of the questions, it's there. That's something, and there are training programs obviously available. And Nirmala, and any other comment you'd like to make in relation to these questions?
I think Sister Carol made a very important point. Even if we talk about the gap between the younger sisters and the older ones is becoming far wide. And the number of vocations even in India is on the decline. So while we would like our younger sisters to take care, we have not to forget to accompany the young ones in their own ministry, in their spiritual need, as well as to, actively engage the older one, whoever can, to be able to contribute with their wisdom and their experience to the lives of the younger sisters. I also feel that this kind of conversation, there are no perfect solutions to these questions that are coming, but talking together, listening to each other, discerning, something might touch me and I take it forward for my congregation.
Yeah. Thank you. There's a good question here is how to focus on wellness in such a way that the sisters who are sick don't feel their sickness is being ignored. So it's this balance, isn't it?
Mm,
That is a challenge, and but at least if we're attentive to that, we may respond in an appropriate way. Siobhan, from your experience, what would you how to balance
it's how to balance. It's
wellness, a focus on
different
wellness and
wellness,
sickness and
yeah,
sickness.
and
yeah.
sickness. Yeah, there
Mhm.
is. It's getting that. I think that's a very individual thing,
Mhm.
because that will, I think, vary from sister to sister as well. The focus has to be on wellness, but we have to ensure that everything possible is done to maintain the physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental health well-being of all of our sisters at whatever stage of life they're at, younger or older. I think if we go down too much the wellness road, there's a risk of denial, as well. So it's that balance. It's that balance. It's experience and maturity on behalf of everyone in trying to deal with it. And I think openness as well. And I think some of it comes back to relationship, because if I'm not feeling well on any level, that there is somebody that I'm able to say that to, that can help me to deal with that and access what I may need.
Right.
But if that relationship is strained, there's more of a risk that won't be as attended to as is necessary.
Thank you. Patricia, am I missing any other questions?
Actually, Pat, there are a lot of suggestions,
Yeah.
questions and suggestions to USG and Hilton, to train the congregation and also young sisters and elderly together to make this journey together. And also to share good practices in congregation where they are dealing with this difficulty. And some of them is also highlighting the fact that when a sister is outside, is also affected the community life. And another question was about the special request of sisters who have cognitive problems about to be closer to their family more than the religious congregations.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Do any of you want to comment, or do we just take those as a collection of reflections, because we will be looking at them as UISG and with the Hilton Foundation on how to move forward, and it will affect future webinars. I'd be interested to hear from Father Tom Galt, if he's still with us, just on what you have been hearing, Tom, as this conversation has unfolded, and in the light of your first presentation.
Thank you, Sister. It's been a very rich conversation and discussion so far. I think a key issue is this recognition, especially of younger members, of how do they manage and negotiate an environment where they're in a community with a very large number of elderly or infirm sisters, and the importance that they have been called and have generously responded to the charism and the mission of the community, and that be respected, and they be able to participate fully in that. I think that is a key element we have seen in the research. The other piece is simply for the care facilities, the importance of maintaining some daily order of religious life.
Mm-hmm.
So that older sisters, some with dementia, but others simply because we get old and a little more fearful or anxious, going to a facility that does not have some semblance or recognition of being a religious community can be so frightening. And tragically, the sister can feel that she's being abandoned, after giving 50, 60 years of her life in the community. That's not what is happening, but that's what sister experiences. So being very attentive to that, and how do we address that or mitigate it in some way becomes very important, which emphasizes, I think, for many communities, the importance of the collaborating together. These are some issues, resources that few communities could do by themselves, but several communities together would be able to provide for their members.
I want to thank all of you as we bring this session to a close. And we're now going to take, because of the background that you've given us, I'm sure it has, that sisters are beginning to reflect on their own communities and on their own contexts, in their own cultures. And so this is a very important step that we're taking now, because we're inviting you to fill in a very short survey, and you will get instructions now in a moment on what you are to do. You will be asked to fill in what you see. Now, there are many concerns that have been named and many challenges. What we're trying to say, can you pick out one that is particularly demanding for your congregation in the various parts of the world? And then we're also asking you to identify good practice that you've seen and that we could learn from. So I think Sister Paula is going to lead us in this section, and or Patrizia is going to lead us. And if you could, you have 10 minutes to complete this. And it is a very important part of our planning, because we want to plan together, not a group of us here isolated away from the reality on the ground. So we need your input. So Patrizia, I leave it to you.
Thank you, Sister Pat. Actually, we are copying the link on the chat, and Ricardo is also sharing the link of the Google form. Don't worry if you're not able to do it right now, because Sister Paula will send it to you again tomorrow, the link. But we would like you to fill it in now, because you are fresh, and it's good because it takes just a few minutes. So I'm going to copy now in the chat the other two languages. You can also write in Portuguese, no problem for that. So you can take the link in the chat or in this slide. Thank you. You will have some minutes to do that.
Just to say, if you're a member of general administration, you can fill in for the different parts of the world. If you're a member, if you're a provincial or operating at provincial or regional level, you fill in there. So do it at whatever level you're able to do. It's not necessary to complete every section. Thank you. So it's 43 minutes past the hour. So you will have until 10 minutes to the hour. Or 5 minutes to the hour, sorry. If you have time when you're finished, we would be grateful if you would write just a comment in the chat so we get some feedback directly on how you have experienced this session today. Now, perhaps we can move towards the conclusion of our session today. Just to say that the results of the Google form will be collated. Also, anything you put in the chat will be collected. We will translate Father Thomas's PowerPoint so that you have that PowerPoint in the different languages. We make the biographies of those who spoke to you today available. And we will take all the material that you have given us, and you can complete the draft. If you haven't completed the Google form as of now, we will resend it to everybody so that you can complete it later. We're very grateful, but this is something that, this is a journey we're going on together. It really is a synodal journey in terms of how do we respond together and make the way together and use the resources that are at our disposal and the experienced people have in this area. And so I would like to invite Sister Jane to say some concluding words before we end with the final prayer.
Thank you very much, Sister Pat. This has been really a rich conversation and a very stimulating session. Thank you to Sister Pat, Sister Carol, Sister Nirmala, and Sister Swan for sharing your deep insights and providing variety of perspectives on how the issue of elderly care is manifesting itself in our communities. Thank you to Father Tom for putting forward the data to illustrate the situation and calling us for a need for action. We have listened to many perspectives and important observations, in my opinion, about the needs of our elderly members, and many ideas and experiences about how to ensure sisters' lives are lived with dignity until the end. Personally, I urge you that we take this conversation to our conferences, so we take intentional steps towards finding a solution within our own cultural context. As I listened, I heard the following, just a few insights: that elderly care is a reality, and tackling the challenge needs to be tailored to our cultural context. Potential decline of the numbers of sisters in the future is a reality, and there are fewer children being baptized into the Catholic Church. I had maintaining identity and quality of life of sisters all through life is important, and supporting those sisters to grow in their life for holistic formation until we meet God. The issue is not only financial, but also spiritual, emotional, and healthy one for vital living. I heard about our young sisters and some of the sisters that also they need to be supported along the continuum of their life, and even as they transition from active ministry to go back to our communities. I heard of programs to support sisters to transition from active ministry to start preparation early, so that then they are ready to transition from active ministry. I heard of collaboration in finding solutions and providing services to put down the cost for care. I heard of younger sisters' desire for clarity of the mission and increased collaboration, networking, and eager to expand their mission. And that the congregations are dealing with a large number of infirm and elderly sisters, and the needs are not the same for each congregation, but we have to have the dialogue, as solutions will be different by each continent. For me, we now understand better the question we must answer and the answer we must plan for. We cannot do this alone. We need each other. As a global sisterhood, we have a responsibility to care for those whose shoulders we stand, for the mission and for our charisms. The Hilton Foundation is ready to put resources forward to support the issue of elder care for the sisters at national and global levels. But solutions in each country or continent will be very different. We really want to hear your voice. That's why we are holding these sessions on how we could help. We hope to form a global committee to advise on the best ways to put resources forward to solve some of these challenges. And through CARA, we will produce a paper documenting this conversation for discussion at national and regional levels. And Sister Pat and the committee at the USG are very supportive of this. As we look forward on April 11th, we will begin to bring forward those thoughts and about solutions and potential models for action. How we think about funding for and affordability of elder care, how to prepare our congregations and our sisters for new ways of living and supporting sisters to continue living a life of dignity. How to collaborate effectively so that multiple congregations can together address the needs of aging within their own context. And how to serve our sisters who are ill, particularly how to address the challenges of sisters who have terminal illnesses and mental health issues. As I said when we began today, this is a conversation and dialogue, reflection and contemplation on possibilities of addressing quality elder care for the common good of religious life. It is the beginning of sharing our needs, our priorities, our experiences and approaches. It is the beginning of our planning. And there are those who are ahead in this planning. This planning will lead to concrete action at the global, continental, and national levels. Of course, the partnership will be crucial, as we should learn from countries that have made significant strides in planning. The US, for example, has made good plans which others can learn from. But even among those countries that are well ahead in planning, some congregations are still struggling. In the spirit of solidarity, we work together to find meaningful solutions to address the issue in concrete ways. We hope this conversation will create an international committee to explore the most appropriate actions and solutions. We hope you initiate conversations at your national conferences. We at the Hilton Foundation look forward to continued dialogue and support for Catholic sisters to act on that conversation and to protect our mutual treasure, which is you, our sisters. Thank you, and over to you, Pat.
Thank you very much, Sister Jane. Thank you for those reassuring words of the support of the Hilton Foundation, and also of beginning this journey together to see how we can respond at the different levels that are appropriate according to congregational needs and also cultural needs. I think you have outlined the framework within which we can work internationally and so help one another in a spirit of solidarity and a spirit of leadership. And we thank you for your leadership within the Conrad Hilton Foundation and for all the support you give to Catholic sisters at so many different levels throughout the world. And we ask you to express our gratitude to the Foundation for this gift, and which is a way of acknowledging, I think, the value and the contribution that Catholic sisters have made and are making in every society throughout the world. I think Conrad Hilton, in his reflection, and above all, he said, look after the good sisters. He, at a personal level, was very affirming of the role sisters played in his life, as are many millions of people throughout the world. So we're grateful for the Foundation's support. So thank you to all those who filled in the survey and those who will finish in the coming days. That data will help us as we craft what the next gathering will be in April. And we ask you to please rejoin the conversation at the next stage so that we move forward together. And now we're moving to our last moment of prayer. In gratitude, first of all, to Father Tom, to Sisters Siobhan, Nirmala, and also Carol for what they have contributed today. My gratitude to Sister Sylvia, who is with us now, but was unable to join for the opening prayer, which she prepared. My gratitude to the translators who have done such a good job, to all the technical staff at UISD, Patrizia, Florence, Paula, and Ricardo, and others who have helped to make this webinar possible in so many different languages. And now we will go to our closing prayer, which has been prepared by Sister Cleofa Trans, who's a Dominican sister. And we're grateful to you. You're coming to us from the Philippines, and please lead us in this final prayer of this important gathering together. Thank you very much, Sister.
Around the world, we are now confronted with the realities of our congregations and the future of our sisters, the elderly sisters. What we need to do this time is to offer to God all our concerns. He loved us from the very start that He called us to be His own. For our closing prayer, for a moment. Did you see my slides, sister?
Yes, you can, sister. If you press the little, or if you press F5 on your computer.
Yes, sister. Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
I think this is not the beginning of the prayer for a while. I want to start it from the very start.
Place the cursor on the first slide.
Yeah. Is it? Thank you,
and
sister.
then press F5.
Thank you for bearing with me. Okay. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh, gracious and loving God, our heart is full of gladness and joy, for you called us together and be one. I can bring my slides, sorry. Oh, sister, I can't. Sorry.
Take your time. It's all right.
I can scroll down. I cannot scroll down my slides. Is there somebody who is managing the?
Yeah.
Sorry, sister.
Yeah. Can you see, Paula, can you download and see, or Ricardo, can you?
Ricardo, yeah.
Can you
Ricardo.
scroll down the slides, please?
I can do that. I have it open. Just a second.
Okay.
Okay, because I know that somebody is managing. Thank you, sister.
Is there a music, sister?
Yes, sister, there's the background music for that. their turn unto him. Our tranquility, we begin to know how much you love us. Let your Spirit be with us, that we may have a clear and Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and will be forever. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Sister Cleofa, for that beautiful prayer. And thank you to all who participated today. And maybe we could open the microphones and just say goodbye to one another. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sister Pat.
Thank you, Nirmala. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thanks so
much.
much, Pat. Thanks, Siobhan. Thanks,
Thank
Nirmala.
you.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Patricia and Lawrence.
Mhm. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci
Muchas gracias, hermanas.
Gracias por todo. Hasta la próxima.
A la próxima.
Gracias a todos.
Gracias.
So long, everybody.
Gracias, Alfa.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Gracias a todas. Venga para que vea la realidad.
Muchas gracias a Florence, Patricia, Pat.
Qué alegría de estar juntas.
Lo de esto no que digo que estaba descolocadas, porque no sabéis cómo estaba aquí cuando yo he venido.
Merci.
Tienes razón.
Merci.
Hola, Rosy.
Everyone's going, so everyone is going, so I think.
Thank you very much.
Adiós, chao.